So folks, today we will go over what a real estate lawyer does within a real estate transaction. The importance of a good, vocal, and experienced lawyer goes a very long way. We will also chat about what are the most common mistakes made by purchasers and sellers, which now you can avoid. And to chime in, joining us today is Ricky Rathore, lawyer from Rathore Baig Law. Now, don't be fooled by his looks, guys. He's young, he's handsome, he's well-dressed, he's well-spoken, but he is by far one of the most knowledgeable brokers that I have ever worked with or spent time with. His colleagues say he's a machine. First one in the office, last one out of the office, and responds within just minutes to any inquiry at any given time of the day. All the qualities that you would want in your lawyer and just some of the many reasons why he is our client favorite. So let's dive right into it. Ricky, thank you so much for joining us today, buddy.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Honestly, buddy, it's our pleasure. There's so many things that happen behind the scenes in terms of real estate law. My clients, I'm sure many consumers watching this probably don't know what that is, right? And I'm going to pick your head. I have a list of questions I want to ask you, but I know they're going to find a ton of value from this. So if it's okay with you, buddy, let's dive right into it.
Let's go.
All right, man. At a preliminary level, can you give us an overview of the type of tasks a real estate lawyer does in a real estate transaction?
Okay, so it varies and it depends on the stage that we as attorneys receive the file. So if it's a complicated transaction, normally we'll be involved in the beginning. We'll do due diligence even before an offer is written sometimes. If it's not so complicated, we'll usually get involved once the agreement's already done. The realtor's done the job, they put together the contract, and we're either reviewing that in a conditional period or we're giving insights before that offer actually goes in. But it really depends on the type of property. We don't get usually involved at an early stage because people want to keep costs low. They don't want a lawyer to review the basic things that they've hired their agent to do. And more often than not, the agent's quite competent. If it's something that requires legal advice, they'll rope us in the beginning so that we can actually help with the drafting of the agreement and those sorts of things. So that's one part of it. Now, 9 out of the 10 times, if it's a typical real estate transaction, we'll receive an already accepted firm deal, at which point we can't actually do anything. We're literally going to enforce the rights that your realtor has negotiated for you. Okay. And at this point, it's more, I would say, clerical and administrative. What we're doing is we're checking title, we're checking non-title, we're doing things like tax searches, ordering title insurance, checking for utility accounts, stuff like that. And then really just ensuring that we've requisitioned or completed the title search on time. We've submitted everything to the seller's lawyer if we're the buying side. And if we're on the other side, we're reviewing those requisitions and responding based on the client's instructions. And then ultimately seeing the transaction through to the end, closing the deal, and then dealing with any follow-up if there's any issues after the fact.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. Right now, I understand, and this is very common where I will negotiate the offer on behalf of my client's buyer or seller, and I'll go over everything with them. Yep. In the event the client wants a legal opinion, can they send you the agreement of purchase and sale for a lawyer's review at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. And many clients do, especially the more sophisticated ones that want to spend the money to have a second set of eyes. They will definitely do that.
Okay. And now let's say the offer has been accepted, right?
Yeah.
At that point, it is standard practice for the real estate agent or their office listing brokers to send you all the documents. At that point, what is required from the client's end for you to create that file to get the ball rolling?
So once we get the base set of documents, and I always, if you've seen my previous videos, you'll hear me refer to the agreement like the sun. Everything revolves around it, okay? So I get the base documents. I know what the rights and obligations are that are afforded to the clients. If I don't know the clients personally, I'll ask the agent to connect us so that we can collect the documents following that. Normally, that just includes things like legal name, marital status, depending on what they're looking to achieve, whether it's buying or selling, because it will change. Do we need spousal consent? Are there any unidentified parties that may have an interest in the transaction? We'll ask for these types of things. And then on a purchase, really after we've done the title searches, we're preparing based on the mortgage instructions. If there's financing required, clients come in, we go over the title searches and non-title searches, we go over the agreement, we make sure that they understand, okay, before closing, do it, go and do your final inspections and really make sure that you're getting what you've bargained for. So we explain the client their rights, we explain the processes, and that's what we do on the buying side. On the selling side, we'll make sure that any mortgages that are outstanding have been requisitioned to be discharged. So if you've got a mortgage with one of the major financial institutions, we'll send them an email or fax saying that this property sold, we need a payout statement. We need to know how much to pay you on the date of completion and what are the per day costs if there's any time required afterwards for us to wrap this file up and pay you out so that you can provide clean title and discharge your loan. So that's what we do on the seller side. We also look at the requisition letter or the title search that we received from the buyer's lawyer. We go through that with the client and say, okay, are these things that are in the agreement that we've agreed to rectify, or are they things that, we can tell the other party to please satisfy themselves politely? So we go through those motions, create the paperwork, sign off, and it's pretty standard. It's pretty clerical, I would say, for the most part.
For you, maybe because you're a machine and you've done this so much, but for not for everyone. And obviously, when I do a real estate transaction, I'm hand in hand with the mortgage broker and the lawyer for my client. And sometimes my clients have chosen a real estate professional that, oh my God, man, I'm like, man, this is gonna take everything in the trash if we don't work this out, because they either don't know what they're doing or whatever the case is. I don't want to get into details. I don't want to trash anybody. So let's go back into something really quick, Ricky. Title insurance.
There's something very interesting you said, and
Sure.
I think I should say that. See, my ability to protect our mutual client is only as good as the job that the realtor has done if I'm not involved in the negotiation process. I can't conjure up rights under a contract that don't already exist. Sure. So the agent's role and the agent's responsibility is so critical in those beginning stages, because once I've got a firm and binding valid agreement of purchase and sale, it's very limited things I can do to protect the client if they're not protected themselves in the agreement.
So let's dive into that. So the first question, I'm gonna ask you two-part questions, Ricky. For one, what is title insurance? When do you typically check it? Sorry, what is title search? And when do you typically check it in a real estate transaction? And then secondly, can you give us like maybe 4 or 5 clauses that you think every realtor should add in the agreement of purchase and sale when representing a purchaser, let's say?
Okay, so when we ask what is a title search and when do we do it, title searches are typically done a week or two before closing. Okay, if I'm the buyer's agent, I'm going to want to have that title search all the way up until closing if I can. If I'm the seller's agent, I'm going to want that to be as far from the closing date as possible, because logically, the title search allows the buyer's lawyer to submit requisitions to say, hey, I found this problem, I found this problem, I found this problem, and these are the rights that we have in the agreement. You have to rectify these things. If you miss that date, well, then you've lost your right to requisition. And unless the matter goes to the heart of title, the root of title, or the heart of the contract, the other party can say that your requisition was late, so we don't need to attend to any of these matters unless they're in the contract. So it has to be something severe that would give you rights at that point. So again, for a buyer, like, we want to make sure that the realtor has sent us the documents before the expiry so that our mutual clients' rights aren't prejudiced in any way. That's really important. Okay. So those are the timelines. What was the next question you had there?
What would you say are common 4 or 5 clauses that you recommend as a lawyer every realtor should put in a contract when, let's say, representing a purchaser to best protect their interest?
Okay, so there's no one size fits all. Okay, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and that's where your expertise as an agent come into play to kind of, if you see a property that's got a pool, well, that's going to change how you negotiate that contract. If you've got a newer property that's built in the last year or so, you're going to want occupancy certificates. You're going to want the Tarion documents. You're going to want the pre-delivery inspection. Like, again, it's on a case-by-case basis. Now, generally speaking, you've got to remember the default legal presumption is buyer beware. Whatever you're buying, make sure you're satisfied with it. Okay. And so some of the clauses that we see that are always advisable deal with things that are outside of that provision. So things like death, murder, suicide, stigmas, water penetration, grow house, stuff like that. You want to make sure that you've padded into your agreement. And moreover, you want the seller to represent and more effective as of the date of closing, because things can change, between the time they sign the agreement and the actual closing. You want to make sure that those representations and warranties start from the day of closing. And so those are, I would call, standard clauses you would want to add into most transactions, because ORIAs, if you're using the ORIA agreement, that is, their pre-printed provisions only go so far. You have to add additional rights by virtue of the schedules that we add to them.
Yeah, there's a Schedule A that we call as part of every single agreement of purchase and sale. That is where your real estate professional will add clauses to protect you or any sort of conditions. And then the standard practice is whatever is in writing stands, whatever is agreed upon verbally, it doesn't really mean anything, doesn't really have a hold of anything. So try your best to put it in writing, right? Now, Ricky, I'm going to
entire agreement clause in the agreement, meaning that if you've got something that isn't a part of the contract, it's not going to give you any ability to enforce it. Yeah. And so even in today's day and age, like what we're finding often now is that the seller's been served by the city. They found out that there's an illegal in-law suite with a kitchen and a full stove and everything, but the seller doesn't tell the buyer that they've received this notice. The buyer gets the love letter following closing. So, it's stuff like this. If you see that there's a basement, ask for permits. If it's not permitted, make sure your client understands the risk. This is really where it goes into, being a good realtor and advising your clients to protect them in these situations.
That is a huge, huge factor. And I can't think of the amount of times we have looked at homes, purchased homes that had a basement apartment. I obviously know what to look for when it comes to documentations to better protect our clients, but a lot of realtors don't. And then you hear that horror story after the closing, and unfortunately they come and complain to you, but it was a realtor's job to protect them at a preliminary stage because, you're pretty much enforcing whatever they negotiated, right? Ricky, talk to me about title insurance, what it is, and the importance of it.
So it's literally insurance for title, right? Now, title insurance doesn't just get limited to title. Sometimes they cover things that are not title related, such as, tax arrears and stuff like that as well. Whether it's commercial or residential or any kind of acquisition, when it comes to real estate, it's always something that your real estate lawyer will recommend. Because relative to the purchase price, it's such a negligent, insignificant amount that you're paying to protect yourself from the purchase, to protect yourselves from things that could happen in the future. If there's issues with title or defects or things that could not have been caught or were not in the agreement, title insurance is that last kind of resource that you have. And more often than not, it's going to protect you. Whereas a lawyer's opinion, which is what we used to rely on back in the day, now it's in addition to a lawyer's opinion, you would have to sue your lawyer to get recourse. People didn't do that, or if they did it, the lawyer may not have any money to take out of. And so title insurance gives you a little bit of added protection to ensure that your largest transaction for the average person watching this video, I'm sure, is at least safeguarded to some extent.
Got it. Now, Ricky, before the closing, the purchaser or the sellers, they usually meet with their lawyer. Before, during COVID, it was all over Zoom, and now there's in-person meetings should the consumer want to. Yeah. During that meeting, there's a document called Statement of Adjustment, and you go over that with your client. What is that?
Okay, so when you look at the agreement of purchase and sale, we have an actual adjustments clause, which says that, if it's a condo or whatever type of property it is, taxes, maintenance, all of those things get adjusted. Okay, so let's use now as an example. It's October 28th. Most people have paid up their property taxes for the whole year now. If my closing is on October 30th or 31st, the Monday, what'll end up happening is that if the seller's overpaid because they paid for the whole year, the day of closing, including the actual day, so the 31st till the end of the year that's been prepaid by the sellers, that needs to be credited in favor of the seller. So this statement of adjustments will adjust things like maintenance fees, taxes, these sorts of things get adjusted, and the buyer pays because the seller's already paid and they're basically getting those credits. So the final amount on the statement of adjustments is purchase price, less deposit, less the adjustments, and then there's credits and debits, and then that's how we figure out what the balance due is on closing.
Awesome. Ricky, a handful of more questions, not even, and then I promise I'll let you go back to work. I can hear the notifications in the background, so I know you're having a busy day. If in terms of purchasing, first-time home buyers, move-up buyers, investors, what would you say are the most common top 3 mistakes that you see that come to your radar that you would like to now share and hopefully help these guys prevent it from happening?
Not doing due diligence on your agent, not doing due diligence on your lawyer, and not doing due diligence on your mortgage agent, right? You want to make sure that you vetted the professionals that you're working with, because you're hiring professionals to draft your agreements, to get you the financing, to get you to the close. And if those three pillars in this transaction are not strong, then it's going to prejudice your rights. That's really my advice. Do your due diligence on who you're working with and ensure that they know what they're doing, because if they don't teach you or educate you what your potential rights could be, what your potential obligations could be, and protect you in that agreement, then you're going to be in trouble.
Would you say it's the same advice if you are in a seller's position, or would your advice vary a tad?
I think it's very similar, because even with a seller, you want to go back and talk to your bank or your mortgage agent. There might be prepayment penalties. You may need to port your mortgage. When it comes to hiring a realtor's job is to help you uncover material facts, right? So when you're living in a home for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, the things that someone that is new to the property will uncover, that they're supposed to uncover, will be different from what you know or think as an owner, because you've just become so used to those issues. And so part of the seller's agent's job is going through the property and trying to figure out what are the things that could impact the seller when the property's listed. So these are the kind of things we look at. Agents will walk the boundary. Is there a shed that's on your lot that shouldn't be there? What are the chattels you're selling? What are the things that you're not going to sell? Sometimes people have $100,000 chandeliers that they don't want a part of the contract. So knowing how to navigate that, again, comes from good advice. It doesn't change whether it's a buyer or a seller.
It's making me smile because the amount of times I go into a seller's home and I create a net sheet with them, right? Like when you sell this home, if this is a value, after paying your expenses, one of which could be a mortgage penalty if you're not porting, how much do you net? And they're almost always oblivious of the fact that there is a mortgage penalty. Yeah. Right. And which makes me believe when you got your mortgage, there's no one talked to you about this. Right. Yeah. And sometimes the penalty can be so severe that they may not even want to sell. And if I didn't bring it up, they would find out with you during closing and they would hate, me really, and maybe even want to take me to court for that matter. But that's why it's important to have that conversation in advance. Right now, Ricky, going forward, if someone wants to vet you or they want to have your team represent them in the closing of their home, how do they go about it?
They can reach out to the office at any time. We've got a great team of clerks and lawyers at your disposal. You can check us out online. We do a ton of video content. We try to educate and provide insights, whether you use us or not. We want to make sure that you as a consumer have access to information and enable you to do, things that are in your interests, because there's so much information out there. Google's got a vast library that you can access. YouTube's great. You've got so many different platforms. But really, calling us, we're happy to discuss the file with you and look into it a little bit. And we're happy to work with anybody that sees us as a good partner.
Guys, if you're watching this video, I need you to know Ricky has a massive collage of videos. He has a huge video library, and this is what he does. He records videos almost every single day from what I've noticed. And it's very good educational content, not only just for the consumer, but also real estate professionals too. So I will link his page and his contact info in the description below. Whenever you have any questions, do reach out. But at the bare minimum, visit his channel, because I'm telling you, you will learn a lot. Ricky, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time.
We'll see you soon. Take care, guys.
See you soon. Bye, buddy.
Bye.